So I'm going to talk a little bit about where we look for innovations in other places, and this is also in the function, and this is probably quite close to home for many of you, especially that those are talking about strategic corporate social investment. It's looking within the companies themselves, and thankfully in South Africa, enterprise development is encouraging us to start doing this. In all of the value chain of a company, which you'll see on top, we procure supplies, employ workers, design and develop products, produce them and market and distribute them. There are opportunities to improve people's lives, access and empower the disenfranchised, deliver education, be more environmentally responsible, etc., etc. So we start to break down all these things, and you can actually look, there are opportunities to innovate everywhere around us. And I really like this example, and it's an example of a man from Saudi Arabia he was a psychologist in New York, and he was treating trauma victims. And trauma victims from the wars in the Middle East, from Iraq particularly. And he also had 5 boys. And he had spent time traveling to the Middle East, and in Palestine he arrived there and looked around and saw kids swapping superhero cards. And when we took a look at those cards, they were cards of suicide bombers. So those were the heroes that those kids were looking up to. And at the same time, the West's image of Islam had changed dramatically. So as a father, he was thinking, well, number one, what are the role models we're creating for Islamic youth? But also, what are the role models that we're creating for the rest of the world and what they think about Islam? How does one even begin to start changing those perceptions of a single man who's a psychologist working in his private practice in New York? And he created basically a set of superhero comic strip, which is now an animation series, and now a set of theme parks and back-to-school commercial licensing, called the 99. And each superhero is based on one of the characteristics of Allah. And this is run as a business. And what's exciting about it is saying, well, what is really the purpose of this business? Right? Do we know the purpose is, it's a profitable business, but what's really the purpose behind what this is doing, and what is the function of what it does? We know in South Africa we've had some great examples using mass media communication, again, to try and change behaviors, perceptions. So Soul City, Heartlines, this kind of mass media communication. So not only, I'm using a few international examples because I think it's interesting to kind of explore what's happening in the rest of the world. And where I started is a set of innovations in finance happening. And I know there's going to be a session on impact investing, which is again a set of experimentations, a set of innovations where people are trying to look at how do we use investment capital, potentially some donor capital, and actually look at more sustainable, more scalable outcomes. And these attempts might fail. We don't know. But we know that business is looking at how they're more responsible with their investment capital. I was speaking earlier to one of the delegates about foundations who invest 95% of their capital in the stock market and private equity and property, and 5% they spend on funding programs. There's a real opportunity for them to spend some of their actual capital in business ventures that actually have social impact. And in America, there's a new regulation called program-related investments, which actually starts to encourage foundations to invest business investments around the grants that they're giving to actually support and bolster the ecosystem of the grantee. So again, there's a spectrum from traditional donations right through to market-grade capital, and people are experimenting with all forms of different investments and financing structures in there. And you will have a chance to kind of explore this in that impact investing session. So I've come back to the Madeira performance bond because I really think it's a fascinating example. But that middle point about the corporate sector's participation plays a catalytic role in proving the pay performance concept, while the public sector's funding then scales the initiative to cover millions more affected by malaria. And that was exactly the question that Kathy posed to us as well. How do we do that? This is one example. And can we find others? And interestingly, South African companies investing in that, and they're the first investors in that program. Anglo-American, Nando's, and facilitated by Dalberg Capital.